Imagine being the most powerful man in Rome. You have commanded armies. You have conquered territories. Senators respect you. And suddenly, you enter a room in the imperial palace. And you are never the same again. They don't kill you. It's much worse. They destroy you from the inside. They strip away everything you were. Your honor. Your identity. Your reason for existing. And when you leave, you're still breathing. But you wish you were dead. That is exactly what Messalina, the most feared empress of Rome, did to her enemies. And her eunuchs were the perfect weapons to carry it out. Today you're going to discover why some historians believe what she did was literally worse than any execution. Before we continue, if dark stories like this fascinate you as much as they do me, subscribe now. Turn on the bell. Because what comes after this video is just as disturbing. We are in the year 43 AD. Rome dominates the known world. Claudius occupies the imperial throne. But there is an open secret circulating through taverns, public baths, and the corridors of the Senate. The real power does not belong to the emperor. It belongs to his wife, Valeria Messalina. And when I say power, I'm not talking about decorative influence. I'm talking about absolute power. The kind of power that makes veteran generals tremble when they receive an invitation to dinner at the palace. Because many who crossed those doors did not come out the same. Some did not come out alive. Others came out completely destroyed. Messalina reached the throne practically as a child. She was barely 15 years old when she married Claudius, a man twice her age. Claudius was not the most attractive candidate. He limped. He stuttered. His own family considered him useless. But Messalina saw something no one else did. Pure opportunity. When Claudius became emperor almost by accident after the assassination of Caligula, she found herself the most powerful woman in the world before turning 20. And she had no intention of wasting that position. During the first months, she observed. She studied. She learned how power really worked in Rome. And she discovered something fascinating. Real power did not reside in the legions or the Senate. It resided in information. Knowing who owed money to whom. Who had secret lovers. Who had said something careless about the emperor after a few cups of wine. And there was a group of people who had access to all this information without anyone paying attention to them. The eunuchs. The eunuchs of the imperial palace were invisible. They cleaned the rooms where senators had private conversations. They served wine at dinners where alliances were negotiated. They were present in the most intimate moments of Roman power. And precisely because society considered them insignificant, people spoke in front of them as if they were furniture. Messalina understood that the most powerful people in any organization are those who control the flow of information. And she began to cultivate relationships with these men. She offered them favors. Protection. Small luxuries. In exchange, they told her everything. By the year 44, she had transformed the palace's domestic service into something modern historians compare to an intelligence agency. Her eunuchs were not passive spies. They were active agents. They cultivated sources. They planted false information when convenient. They manipulated situations to create exactly the conditions Messalina needed. Now, let me show you how this worked in practice. An ambitious senator. Let's call him Marcus. He has connections, political talent, everything needed to rise. But he also has a secret. He owes a fortune to several lenders because of failed investments. If that becomes known, his political career is over. One day, Marcus receives an invitation to dinner at the palace. During the dinner, Messalina casually mentions that she has heard rumors about a senator with financial problems. She gives no names. But the details are specific enough to send a chill down Marcus's spine. She smiles. Changes the subject. At the end of the night, a eunuch discreetly hands him a document. Marcus opens it in the privacy of his home. It is a detailed list of all his debts. Names. Amounts. Dates. And a note at the end. It would be a shame if this reached the wrong people. Your friend, Messalina. From that moment on, Marcus belongs to her. She doesn't need to threaten him openly. She doesn't need to ask for anything yet. She only needs him to know that she knows. And that she can destroy him whenever she wants. This pattern repeated dozens of times. Perhaps hundreds. But information gathering was only the first phase. Because there is something you need to understand about Rome to grasp why what Messalina did was considered worse than death. In Rome, your identity was not internal. It existed in the perception of others. The Romans had a concept called dignitas. Your publicly recognized worth. Your position in the social hierarchy. Without dignitas, you were nobody. It didn't matter how much wealth you had. For elite men, dignitas was intimately tied to masculinity. And Roman masculinity was very specific. It was about dominating, never being dominated. About penetrating, never being penetrated. Being reduced to a passive position, being feminized in any way, was a form of social death. And here is the crucial point. This social death was considered worse than physical death. Because physical death was the end. You could die with honor. Your memory would continue to be respected. But public humiliation survived you. Your descendants would carry your shame forever. Messalina developed what we might call a repertoire of destruction. There were certain rooms in the palace known among insiders as the rooms of transformation. They appeared on no official map. But everyone who mattered knew they existed. The eunuchs controlled access. And what happened inside was designed specifically to break people in ways that left them technically functioning, but psychologically and socially destroyed. They placed victims in positions coded as feminine in the Roman mindset. They forced them to submit to acts that marked them as passive, as dominated. And the eunuchs, men whom Roman society already considered less than complete men, were the instruments of this transformation. The psychological perversity was calculated. It wasn't just the humiliation itself. It was who administered it. Being dominated by slaves. By eunuchs. By those below you in every imaginable hierarchy. That was a total inversion of the natural order of the Roman universe. And afterward, when you left that room, you had to live with what had happened. But it was worse. Because Messalina made sure others knew as well. Not all the details. Never all the details, because that could generate sympathy. But enough. Carefully planted rumors. Insinuations. Enough so that when you walked through the forum, you felt the stares. Enough for your dignitas to be irreparably damaged. The most documented case is that of Valerius Asiaticus. A man who had everything. He had been consul twice. He was immensely wealthy. He had dangerous military connections. And he owned the gardens of Lucullus, the most beautiful in all of Rome. Messalina wanted them. But she couldn't simply take them. Asiaticus was too powerful. So the operation began. Her eunuchs followed him for months. Every dinner. Every public bath. Every private meeting was reported. They recorded every careless comment. Every casual criticism of the emperor. They built a file that, presented correctly, could make him look like a conspirator. When Messalina decided to act, the accusation was treason. But before the formal trial, she invited Asiaticus to a private meeting at the palace. What exactly happened in that room, the sources do not say clearly. But they strongly suggest he was subjected to some form of humiliating ritual designed to break his will. The eunuchs were present. When Asiaticus emerged, he was a different man. Trembling. Destroyed. During his trial, he barely defended himself. He did not present obvious arguments. He did not call witnesses who could have saved him. It was as if a fundamental part of him had shut down. He was found guilty. But he asked permission to commit suicide instead of being publicly executed. He retired to the gardens he loved so much. And opened his veins. According to the chronicles, as he bled to death, he gave instructions that his funeral pyre be built far from certain trees, so the smoke would not damage the plants. Even in death, he tried to maintain some sense of control. Some illusion that he still owned his destiny. Immediately afterward, before the body was cold, Messalina was already planning how to remodel the gardens to her taste. For 7 years, this system worked perfectly. But absolute power generates a dangerous illusion. The illusion that you can do anything without consequences. And in the year 48, Messalina made the mistake that would destroy her. She fell in love with Gaius Silius, a young senator. And she decided to marry him. While still married to Claudius. Some of her eunuchs began to worry. They had built their power alongside her. But they knew that if she fell, they would fall too. And this bigamous marriage was exactly the kind of madness that would guarantee her downfall. Quietly, they began feeding information to Narcissus, one of Claudius's most powerful freedmen. The betrayal was complete. When Claudius learned the truth, the response was brutal. Silius was executed immediately. Messalina tried to flee to the gardens of Lucullus, ironically the same place where Asiaticus had died because of her. She tried to write letters begging for forgiveness. It didn't work. The soldiers arrived with orders to execute her. According to the chronicles, she attempted suicide but could not complete the act. A soldier had to finish the job. She was about 22 years old. And then came the purge of the eunuchs. Posides, the one closest to Messalina, was publicly executed in the Forum. According to some accounts, before dying he was subjected to the same humiliations he had administered to others. Others were sent to the arena, thrown to beasts without weapons. Some committed suicide before being captured. A few, those who cooperated early in the betrayal, received clemency. They were sold to other masters in distant provinces, or freed with small sums of money to start new lives marked by the shame of their past. Rome wanted to forget that Messalina had ever existed. Claudius ordered that her name never be mentioned in his presence. But the empire could not simply forget. Too many families had lost members. Too many reputations had been destroyed. The question that lingered was uncomfortable. How had this been possible? How had a system allowed a single person to accumulate so much destructive power? Rome's answer was to turn Messalina into a unique monster. An aberration. That way, they avoided examining the failures of the system itself. But modern historians see something different. They see a system that concentrated power without controls. That excluded women from formal power, pushing them into informal and destructive channels. That created entire populations of marginalized people who could be instrumentalized as tools of terror. What Messalina did was genuinely horrific. The victims suffered in ways they considered worse than death. But she was as much a product of her system as she was an active agent within it. The eunuchs were victims turned perpetrators. And the terror they administered follows a pattern we see repeated throughout human history. Omnipresent surveillance. Selective but exemplary punishments. The instrumentalization of the marginalized as enforcers. This story does not exist to make us feel superior to the ancient Romans. It exists to remind us of what we are capable of. Both the best and the worst. And only by honestly confronting the worst can we have any hope of not repeating it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Messalina judged fairly, or was she a victim of misogynistic propaganda? How much responsibility do the eunuchs bear for their actions? Are there really things worse than death? If this video made you think, like it. Share it with someone who appreciates history without filters. And subscribe, because we have many more stories from the past that need to be told. Stories that challenge us. That make us uncomfortable. That make us ask difficult questions about human nature. See you in the next video.